The vanishing the alien queen was feared across the stars. Entire fleets bent their heads when her ships entered orbit. Whole worlds obeyed her voice without question. Her power came not only from her armies and her weapons, but also from her bloodline. The queen had 3 daughters, and each one was destined to rule one day. They were the light of her empire, the promise of its future. The daughters were kept in the safest palace in the galaxy. No enemy could reach them. Guards stood at every gate, armored machines patrolled the skies, and spies watched for danger across the stars. Every being knew the queen would destroy whole civilizations if her children were harmed. But one night, the impossible happened. The palace alarms rang, echoing through the crystal towers. Guards rushed through the golden halls. Rooms were searched, corridors locked down, ships scanned. Yet when the panic settled, the truth was clear. The daughters were gone. Vanished. The queen's voice thundered through the palace. Her roar shook the very walls. "Find them," she ordered, her eyes glowing like twin suns. Soldiers knelt in fear, swearing their loyalty, promising to bring the princesses back. But in their hearts even they wondered, how could anyone steal the daughters of the most feared queen in the galaxy? Whispers began to spread. Perhaps it was a rival empire, bold enough to strike at the heart of her power. Perhaps traitors within the palace had betrayed her trust. Some whispered of darker things, of shadows that moved between worlds unseen, of enemies who did not fight with ships and guns but with silence and cunning. The queen searched the palace herself. She stormed into the royal chambers, her claws tearing through curtains and walls. The beds were empty, the toys untouched, the windows sealed. There was no trace, no sign of a struggle. It was as if her daughters had simply dissolved into the air. Her anger burned brighter than any star. She called her generals. "Search every system. Tear apart every planet if you must. Bring them to me." Armadas spread across the galaxy. Fleets of black warships swarmed from system to system. Entire worlds trembled, fearing her wrath. Yet the search brought nothing. The palace grew silent. The laughter of her daughters no longer filled the halls. The queen walked the gardens alone, her crown heavy on her head. Memories struck her like blades. The time her youngest daughter had climbed onto her throne and declared herself queen. The time the eldest had stood bravely against a soldier during training, refusing to step back. The time the middle child had sung a song so beautiful that even the stars seemed to listen. Now they were gone. But the queen was not only a mother, she was a ruler. And she knew one truth: every mystery has a source. Every shadow has a shape. Someone had taken them. And whoever it was, they had made the greatest mistake of their lives. Days turned into weeks. The empire trembled, not from enemies, but from the silence of its queen. She no longer spoke at councils. She no longer sent messages to allies. She sat in her throne room, her claws gripping the armrests, her mind burning with one thought: where are they? Then a small piece of information reached her. A scout ship patrolling the edges of human territory had detected something strange. A faint energy signal, weak but unusual. At first, the report was dismissed. Humans were not a threat. They were fragile, short-lived creatures, barely able to travel between stars. Why would they matter? But the signal matched something from the palace. A small device carried by her daughters meant to guide them home if ever they were lost. It was faint, almost gone, but it was there. The queen's eyes narrowed. Humans, could it be true? Could these weak creatures, so often ignored, have taken her daughters? The idea was absurd. And yet the signal did not lie. The queen rose from her throne. Her guards looked at her in fear, for they saw something in her eyes they had never seen before. Not rage, not fury, but cold, burning intent. The search was no longer across the galaxy. It had a target now. The humans would answer. The search begins. The queen's fleet tore through the stars like a storm of fire. Wherever her ships passed, skies darkened and whole planets held their breath. Her command was clear: find the daughters. No matter the cost, every general knew what was at stake. The daughters were not only children, they were symbols. The empire's future depended on them. If they were gone forever, the queen's enemies would rise like vultures. Rivals would whisper that the queen was weak, that her reign had cracks. Already there were rumors. Some said rebels had taken them. Others whispered of human trickery. The queen allowed no delay. Scout ships spread across dozens of systems. Drones scanned dust clouds, asteroid belts, and abandoned stations. On one frozen moon, soldiers found a broken cradle left behind as if to mock them. On another world, a child's song played from an old machine, sending chills through hardened warriors. Each time, the Queen's fury grew deeper. Yet something strange began to happen. The trails did not lead to the great empires or the dangerous warlords. They did not point to ancient enemies. Again and again, the clues seemed to brush against the edges of human space. It made no sense. Humans were insignificant. Their colonies were small, their ships weak. They could not even dream of standing against the Queen. Still, the evidence grew. One scout team patrolling near the human colonies detected footprints on a barren world. Small, delicate, alien. They matched the daughters. Around those prints were others, larger, human. When the report reached the Queen, silence fell across the war room. "Humans," she hissed, her voice low but sharp as a blade. The general shifted nervously. Some argued that it was impossible, that humans lacked the strength, the cunning, or the technology to even touch the royal palace. Others suggested it was a trick by a rival, framing humans to mislead the empire. The Queen listened, but her mind was already made. The humans had something to do with it. Her eyes blazed. "Then I will see these creatures myself." The command was issued. A flagship unlike any other began its journey toward human space. Its hull was black as void, carved with scars of old wars. Its weapons could shatter moons. And at its heart, the Queen herself stood at the command bridge, unblinking, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. As the ship traveled, memories of her daughters haunted her. She remembered their laughter as they ran through the palace gardens. She remembered the eldest asking bold questions no one else dared to ask. The middle one's curious eyes always searching for answers. The youngest's fearless giggle as she played even in the shadows of mighty warriors. Now those memories cut like knives. The Queen clenched her fists. "I will not lose them. Not to rebels. Not to humans. Not to anyone." Meanwhile, across human colonies, the rumors had already arrived. Miners on distant rocks whispered that the alien Queen was coming. Farmers in quiet valleys spoke in hushed tones about fleets seen in their skies. Governments on Earth held emergency meetings. Could it be true? Why would the most feared empire of the galaxy care about them? Most humans laughed nervously. "We're too small to matter," they told each other. "She won't notice us." But deep down they knew. Something was coming. Back on the flagship, the Queen's advisors pressed her for answers. If it was truly humans, one dared to ask, why would they take the princesses? For ransom? For war? The Queen's gaze cut through him. Not for war. They are too weak for war. Her voice dropped, heavy with suspicion. But weakness is not the same as innocence. That sentence hung in the air like a shadow. Then came the break. A patrol ship returned with fresh data. It had intercepted faint signals from a colony world on the human frontier. At first, the signals seemed like background noise, static, interference. But when amplified, the sound was clear. Children's laughter. The Queen froze. Her generals shifted uneasily, their scales prickling, their hearts pounding. No one dared to speak. The Queen stepped closer to the screen, her claws tapping slowly against the floor. The sound was soft, but in the silence of the command bridge, it echoed like thunder, her daughter's laughter. She knew it instantly. For the first time in weeks, her rage dimmed, replaced by something even sharper. Hope. She whispered a single word. Prepare. The fleet shifted course, faster than light, slicing through space toward the human colony. Soldiers prepared weapons, charging cannons that could burn oceans and split mountains. The Queen herself donned her armor, black and crimson, a crown of steel upon her brow. She would go to this colony, and if humans had taken her daughters, then the humans would learn what it meant to provoke the Queen of the Stars. But somewhere deep in her heart, behind all the anger and power, a quiet thought flickered like a fragile flame. If they are alive, why are they with humans? The question haunted her as the flagship roared toward its destination. The search had begun. A strange signal. The Queen's flagship slid through the black sea of space like a blade drawn from its sheath. Behind her, fleets followed in perfect formation, each one carrying soldiers, weapons, and firepower enough to erase entire continents. The Empire trembled in silence, waiting for her next move. She had one purpose now: her daughters. The data from the patrol ship played again on the bridge. Laughter, faint, distorted, but unmistakable. The laughter of children. The Queen's claws tightened on the edge of her throne. To anyone else it was just noise. But she was their mother. She would know their voices anywhere. The general studied the signals with unease. "It comes from the edge of human space," one reported. A colony world, small, barely defended. The Queen's gaze shifted to the star map. The colony was a dot in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, orbiting a dying sun. Nothing about it seemed important. No mines, no fleets, no resources, and yet the voices of her daughters came from there. Humans. She whispered again, the word heavy with venom. The journey to the colony was quiet, but inside the Queen, a storm raged. She remembered every time she had warned her daughters never to trust outsiders. She had told them humans were frail, short-lived, always reaching for things beyond their grasp. Weak, yes, but dangerous because of their strange persistence. Could such creatures really have taken her daughters? Or, an even darker thought, had her daughters gone to them willingly? The question gnawed at her. When the fleet finally dropped out of hyperspace, the colony appeared on the main screen. It was small, barely more than a scattering of metal buildings across a barren plain. Farmlands stretched out in rough lines, watered by clumsy machines. Above it, satellites drifted lazily, old and rusted, barely functioning. To the Queen's eyes, it looked fragile, almost pitiful, and yet from this fragile place came the signal. The Queen rose from her throne. Her soldiers waited, armored and silent. "Send the scouts," she ordered. The first ships descended, black shadows against the weak sun. They swept over the colony, scanning every structure, every life sign. The humans panicked. Farmers dropped their tools and ran. Children cried out as families rushed for shelter. Old ships tried to take off but were quickly disabled by the Empire's fighters. The scouts reported back. No weapons, no armies, just civilians. Ordinary humans living ordinary lives. But then, something strange. In one of the smaller houses on the colony's edge, scanners picked up unusual energy readings. They were faint, but they matched technology from the palace. The Queen's eyes narrowed. "Bring me what lies inside." The soldiers broke through the house. Humans screamed as the armored figures entered. They found nothing unusual at first, a table, food, simple furniture. But in the corner of the room, under a woven blanket, they discovered something that made even hardened warriors pause. A small device, glowing weakly. It was the royal beacon, a tracker given to each daughter designed to guide them home if lost. The Queen's chest tightened. She had not been wrong. Her daughters had been here, but where were they now? The soldiers dragged the human family before her. A man, a woman, and 2 children. They knelt on the metal floor of the flagship, shaking. The Queen leaned forward, her shadow falling over them like a mountain. "Where are they?" The man swallowed hard. We don't know what you mean," her voice thundered. "Do not lie to me!" The children cried. The mother clutched them, trembling. The father's eyes darted between the soldiers and the Queen. Finally, he whispered, "We saw them." The chamber froze. The Queen's eyes blazed. "You saw them?" The man nodded quickly. 3 small ones. Not like us, lost, frightened. They wandered near the fields weeks ago. And then, his voice broke. "A man took them in." The Queen's breath turned to fire. "A man?" "Yes, a human. He lives beyond the colony, near the cliffs. We thought he was protecting them." The Queen's claw tapped against her throne. The sound was slow, sharp, terrifying. Protecting them? Why would a human protect alien princesses? It made no sense unless the daughters had chosen to stay. Her generals leaned closer, whispering. It could be a trap. He could be a spy. Or worse, using them for leverage. The Queen silenced them with a glare. No trap could carry their laughter. She rose, her armor glinting under the lights. "I will see this human myself." The flagship turned toward the cliffs beyond the colony. Storms rolled over the land, dark clouds flashing with lightning. In the distance, a small, lonely dwelling stood against the wind. The Queen's heart pounded in her chest, though her face remained like stone. Every instinct told her to strike, to burn, to crush. But beneath the storm of her rage, a softer voice whispered, "What if they are alive? What if they are safe?" The fleet circled above, weapons ready. Soldiers waited for her command. But the Queen lifted a hand. No fire, she said. Not yet. The air was thick with silence. Even the storm seemed to pause. The queen's eyes fixed on the small house below. Inside she could almost feel their presence, her daughters, and with them, a human. The strange signal had led her here, but what she was about to discover would shake not only her empire, but the galaxy itself. The hunt was over. The encounter was about to begin. The discovery, the storm over the cliffs was wild, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside the queen. Her daughters were near, she could feel it in her bones, hear it in the echo of the faint signal still pulsing from the beacon. The humans had them, and now she would see them with her own eyes. Her soldiers landed first, spreading out around the small dwelling. Their armor gleamed black under the flashes of lightning. The house itself was plain, stone walls, wooden beams, smoke curling from a chimney. Fragile, pathetic. A single blast from her cannon could turn it to dust. And yet, she hesitated. The queen descended, her long cloak dragging against the ground. Every step she took made the earth tremble. Her guards followed, weapons raised, ready to strike at a single command. The wooden door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, the air was warm. A fire burned softly in the corner, filling the room with light. The smell of food lingered, simple but comforting. On a rough wooden table sat a half-finished meal. For a moment it looked like any ordinary human home. Then she saw them, her daughters, curled together on the chest of a human man, sleeping peacefully. Their small bodies rose and fell with his breath, their tiny hands clutching at his shirt as if it were the safest place in the galaxy. The queen froze. Her soldiers did too. None of them had ever seen her pause, not in battle, not in war, not in rage. But now, her eyes locked on the scene and she could not move. The human stirred. Slowly, carefully, he opened his eyes. He did not flinch at the sight of the towering queen and her armed guards. He simply looked at her, tired but calm, as if he had expected her all along. The silence was heavy. Only the crackling fire dared to make a sound. Finally, the queen spoke. Her voice was low, dangerous. What have you done to them? The human's gaze did not waver. Nothing, he said. I kept them alive. The soldiers snarled, ready to strike, but the queen lifted her hand. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. She expected to see fear in her daughters' faces. She expected them to wake and cry for her, to beg for rescue. But when the youngest stirred, she did not scream. Instead, she pressed her face against the human's chest and sighed with comfort. The middle daughter curled closer, while the eldest placed a protective hand on his arm as though he were theirs. The queen's heart twisted. This was wrong. Impossible. Her daughters were heirs to an empire. They should not cling to a human, weak, fragile, unworthy. And yet they did. Her voice hardened. Why do they stay with you? The human shifted, careful not to wake them. Because I did not treat them like prisoners. I gave them food, shelter, warmth. I protected them from the cold and the storms. And when they cried, I listened. The queen's eyes burned. You expect me to believe that is all? No bargain, no trap, no demand for ransom? The man shook his head. I wanted nothing. They were children, lost and alone. What kind of monster would turn them away? Her soldiers hissed at his words. No one spoke to the queen like that and lived. But she remained silent. For the first time in her long reign, she felt something strange crawl into her chest. Doubt. She studied him closely. His hands were scarred, rough from labor. His clothes were worn, patched with care. His eyes held no malice, no greed. Only honesty. Her daughters had chosen him. That was clear now, but why? She remembered all she had taught them. Trust no one, fear weakness, show strength always. Yet here they were, wrapped around this fragile human as if he were the only safe place left in the universe. The eldest stirred, her eyes blinking open. She saw her mother and gasped. For a heartbeat, the queen felt hope surge. Her daughter would run into her arms, but she didn't. Instead, the child whispered, Mother, don't hurt him. The queen's chest turned to stone. Her soldiers looked at her, waiting for the order. To kill the human. To tear him apart. But the words caught in her throat. Her daughter's eyes, full of trust, were fixed not on her but on him. This human. The queen's voice was sharp. Why do they trust you more than me? The man looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because I did not demand their fear. I gave them a choice. The word struck her like a blade. The queen had ruled with fear her entire life. Fear had built her empire, kept her enemies silent, made her name echo like thunder across the stars. But here in this fragile home, fear meant nothing. Her daughters had chosen safety, not power. And safety was a human. The queen's claws flexed. Every instinct told her to kill him, to reclaim her daughters, to erase this insult to her pride. But her daughters' soft breathing held her back. Their small hands gripping him tighter told her the truth she did not want to hear. She could take them by force, but she would lose them forever. For the first time, the queen was unsure. The discovery had shattered everything she believed. Her daughters were alive, but they were not hers alone anymore. The human's secret. The storm outside raged harder, lightning flashing across the cliffs, but inside the small human house, everything was still. The alien queen stood like a mountain of iron, her soldiers tense around her, their weapons humming. The human sat quietly, unmoving, while the three alien princesses slept against him, their small bodies soft and trusting. The queen's voice finally broke the silence. "You will explain," she said, each word sharp as steel. "From the beginning. Tell me how my daughters came to be in your hands." The human nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I will tell you. But you must listen. And you must not harm them while I speak." The soldiers hissed at his boldness. No one gave conditions to the queen. Yet to everyone's surprise, she gave a small nod. "Speak." The man drew a quiet breath. His voice was steady, simple, without fear. "I live alone here," he began. "This colony is small and I have no family left. I work the land. I mend machines. My days are quiet." His gaze softened as he looked down at the sleeping girls. "One night I heard voices in the storm. Not human voices. When I went outside, I found them, your daughters, wandering in the fields, frightened and cold. They were lost, hungry, barefoot in the dirt." The queen's claws dug into her throne. The thought of her daughters, heirs to the empire, reduced to such weakness, burned her soul. But she said nothing. "I brought them inside," the man continued. "They were too tired to resist. I gave them water, food, a fire to keep them warm. At first they did not trust me. They watched me like I was an enemy. But they were children, and children cannot hide fear for long." The queen's eyes flickered to her daughters. Even in their sleep, they leaned into him as if he were a shield. "I expected soldiers to come soon," the man went on. "I knew they must be important. No children simply appear from the sky. But days passed and no one came. So I stayed with them, protected them. When they cried, I held them. When they were hungry, I fed them. When they woke screaming from nightmares, I told them they were safe." He paused, his hand gently brushing a strand of hair from the eldest daughter's face. "And they believed me." The queen's soldiers growled, but none dared to interrupt. The queen herself leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You speak as if they were yours," she said coldly. The man met her gaze. "They are not mine. But until you came, they had no one else." The words cut deep. For weeks the empire had searched, burning through stars and systems. And yet here, in this fragile human home, the daughters had found what armies and fleets could not: safety. The queen wanted to roar, to strike him down where he sat. But her daughters shifted in their sleep, clutching tighter to him. Their small hands spoke louder than his words. Still, suspicion burned. "Why?" she demanded. "Why would you risk yourself for children not your own? Why would you protect the heirs of your enemy?" The human's face grew shadowed. His voice dropped. "Because I once had a child too." The chamber stilled. His eyes turned distant, heavy with memory. "A little girl." She laughed like them. "Bright, fearless. She died years ago. Sickness, there was nothing I could do." His throat tightened, but he forced the words out. "When I found your daughters, I could not let them suffer. I could not let another child fade from the world while I had breath left in me." The queen's chest tightened. She had ruled with iron, but she knew loss. She had feared it all her life, and when her daughters vanished, she had tasted it. This human had lived it. That was his secret. Not weapons, not schemes. Just grief turned into protection. Her generals spat in disgust. A weak story. Lies from a frail creature. But the queen silenced them with a gesture. She stared at the man, searching for deceit. She saw no trick, no greed. Only pain and something stranger still. Strength not of body, but of heart. Her daughter stirred again. The youngest opened her eyes, blinking sleepily. When she saw her mother, she smiled. But she did not let go of the human. Instead, she reached out one hand, tiny and trembling, to both of them, mother and protector. The queen froze. The human whispered softly to the child, calming her until she drifted back to sleep. Then he looked up at the queen again. "You can take them now," he said. "They are yours. They always were. But if they are alive, it is because I kept them so." The queen's claws scraped against the stone floor. She could kill him. One order and he would vanish like dust. Yet the image of her daughters lying dead in the cold storm haunted her. Would they have survived without him? The answer was no. For the first time in her reign, the queen did not know what to do. Rage demanded his death. Pride demanded punishment. But her daughters' trust, their tiny hands clutching at his shirt, begged for mercy. The human secret was simple, yet it was more powerful than fleets and armies. He had nothing but compassion, and compassion had done what her empire could not. The queen looked down at him, her voice low, almost uncertain. "This changes everything." Clash of Worlds, the queen stood in the small house, her armored frame filling the room like a shadow that swallowed the firelight. Her soldiers waited just outside, their weapons ready, the storm flashing on their armor. The human still sat calmly, her daughters curled against him, as if the universe outside did not exist. The queen's heart thundered with rage and confusion. This was not how it should be. Her daughters should have run into her arms. They should have cried for her protection, not clung to a fragile human like he was their fortress. Her generals moved closer, their voices sharp. "Command us, my queen. Let us take the daughters from this creature. Let us burn his house to the ground. He has poisoned their minds with weakness." "Yes," another hissed. "They must be reminded who their true mother is, who their empire belongs to." The queen's gaze never left the human. He did not rise to defend himself. He did not beg. He simply rested one hand on the children, steady, calm, as if daring anyone to harm them. At last, the queen spoke. "Give them to me." Her voice shook the walls. The eldest princess stirred, lifting her head. Her bright eyes looked at her mother, then at the man. She hesitated. The silence that followed cut deeper than any weapon. The queen extended her arms. "Come." The eldest sat up, but instead of running, she turned and pressed herself closer to the human. "Not if you hurt him," she whispered. The queen's breath froze. The middle child awoke too, blinking in confusion. When she saw her mother's soldiers with their weapons raised, she began to cry. "Don't take him away." The youngest clutched his shirt tighter, trembling. The queen's chest burned. Betrayal and sorrow mixed together like fire and ice. Her soldiers growled in anger, but the queen lifted her hand, silencing them. She stepped closer, her armor gleaming, her presence towering over the human. Her voice was sharp enough to cut stone. "What spell have you cast on them?" The man shook his head. "No spell. Only kindness. Only truth," her claws clenched. "They are mine. My blood, my heirs. You have no right to them." The human's eyes hardened. "And yet without me they would have died. Blood alone does not keep them alive. Someone had to care for them." The words stung like venom. Her empire had power, weapons, armies beyond count. But all of that had failed. This one man with nothing but his hands and his will had done what she could not. Her soldiers hissed again. "This is weakness, my queen. He insults you in your own presence. End him now. Show your daughters the cost of betrayal." The queen raised her hand and the soldiers froze. She stared at her daughters, at their wide, tear-filled eyes. If she killed the human, would they thank her? Or would they hate her forever? For the first time, the queen felt the weight of choice. Not the kind of choice made in war, where the answer was always strength. This was different. This was not about power. This was about hearts. The room filled with silence until the eldest daughter spoke again, her voice small but steady. "Mother, he is not our enemy." The queen turned to her, her voice low and trembling. "And what am I? Am I your enemy now?" The child shook her head. "No, you are our mother. But he kept us safe when you were not here. He did not ask for power. He only gave us warmth." The queen's generals growled in disbelief. But the queen's heart cracked. The human finally stood, careful not to disturb the youngest still sleeping against him. He faced the queen, his head high, though he was dwarfed by her presence. "I do not want them," he said firmly. "They are not mine. They belong to you. But they chose to trust me because I gave them something simple. something your empire cannot understand. A choice. They stayed because they felt safe. The queen's jaw tightened. Her soldiers leaned forward, waiting for her order, but she did not speak. Her eyes burned with conflict. She could destroy him. She could erase this insult in a single breath. Yet her daughter's cries, their small hands gripping the human's clothes, held her back. It was not weakness that bound them to him. It was something stronger, something she had never needed before, but now could not ignore. Outside, the fleet circled the planet, waiting for a signal. One command from the queen and the sky would burn. Human governments far away waited too, terrified of what the queen might do. For them, this was not just one man's fate. This was the fate of two species colliding. Inside the house, the choice narrowed to one moment: pride or mercy, power or trust. The queen stood still for a long time, her shadow stretching across the floor. Her daughters held their breath. Her soldiers waited like statues. Finally, her voice came, soft but sharp. "This is not over," she said. "But for now, he lives." Her soldiers stiffened in shock. The queen's eyes locked on the human. "Do not mistake this mercy for weakness. You have altered what should never have been touched, and for that, the galaxy will change." The daughters pressed against him tighter, and for the first time the queen felt a strange fear. Not fear of losing a war, not fear of enemies, but fear of losing her daughters' hearts. This was more than a clash between species. It was a clash of worlds, one ruled by fear, the other by trust, and for the first time the queen was no longer certain which one would win. The twist, the queen's words hung in the air like thunder. "For now, he lives." Her soldiers shifted uneasily, their claws twitching on their weapons. They could not understand why their queen, the fiercest ruler of the stars, would spare a human. To them, mercy was weakness. But the queen was no longer certain. She looked down at her daughters. They were awake now, all three of them, their eyes wide, their small bodies pressed close to the human. They should have run to her. They should have begged for her embrace. Yet they clung to him. It cut her deeper than any blade. The eldest daughter spoke first. Her voice was calm, but her words carried weight. "Mother, you must listen. He did not take us. We came to him." The queen's eyes widened. "You, what?" The child nodded. "We were lost. We were afraid. We followed the beacon, but the storm blinded us. We found this house, and he opened the door. He gave us food. He gave us warmth. He did not ask who we were. He only cared that we were safe." The queen's soldiers hissed in disbelief, but the eldest did not stop. "When the storms raged, he carried us. When we cried, he stayed awake to guard us. When we asked if he would send us away, he said no. He said no child should be alone." Her voice trembled, but she stood firm. "Mother, we chose to stay." The queen's chest felt heavy, as if a black hole pressed against her heart. She turned to the middle daughter, searching for denial, for anything to prove the eldest wrong. But the middle child nodded quickly, tears shining in her eyes. "He made us laugh again. Even when we missed you, he made us forget our fear. We were not prisoners. We were safe." Finally, the youngest lifted her tiny head. Her voice was small, soft, but it struck like lightning. "Mother, the human taught us something you never did." The queen knelt slowly, her armor groaning as she lowered herself to the level of her daughters. Her voice was a whisper, sharp with both fear and curiosity. "What did he teach you?" The youngest placed her small hand on the queen's claw. "He taught us trust." The word echoed in the queen's mind like a scream. Trust. Her empire had never known such a thing. She had ruled with fear, with power, with control. Even her allies obeyed her only because they feared her armies. But her daughters, they had learned something new. Something from a human. The queen rose, towering once more, her cloak swirling like a storm. Her generals waited, eager for her command. Destroy the human. Take the children. Burn the colony. Restore order. But her daughters' voices had broken something inside her. Or perhaps they had awakened something that had been silent too long. Her gaze locked on the human. He stood steady, though he must have felt the weight of 1,000 lives pressing down on him. He did not bow. He did not beg. He only met her eyes. The queen spoke. "You have interfered with my bloodline. You have touched what no other has dared. By all rights, I should destroy you where you stand." The soldier stirred, ready, but the queen lifted her hand. "Yet, if I do, I destroy something greater." Her daughter's eyes lit with relief, though they dared not move. The queen turned, her voice echoing across the chamber. This human has changed what should never have been touched. And because of that, everything will change. Her soldiers stared in shock. Some growled, some bowed their heads in confusion, but none dared defy her. The queen's eyes burned with fire as she faced the human once more. Do not think this is mercy. You have shown my daughters another path, one I never wanted them to see. And now I must decide if that path will shape them, or destroy them. The human's voice was steady. That choice is yours. But know this, what they found here was not weakness. It was strength, the strength of trust. The queen's claws clenched, but she said nothing. She turned back to her daughters. They stared at her with hope, with fear, with something she had never seen before. Defiance mixed with love. The eldest stepped forward, her small hands trembling but her voice strong. Mother, you are our queen. You are our blood. But he is not our enemy. He is proof that even the weakest can be strong in ways you cannot see. Please, do not take that from us. The chamber fell silent. The queen closed her eyes. She had faced wars, rebellions, assassins. She had seen planets burn and stars collapse. But nothing had ever shaken her like the words of her children. When she opened her eyes again, the storm inside her was not gone, but it had changed. She looked at the human one last time. This is not the end. The galaxy will know of this. The balance has shifted. You have altered the course of empires. And I will not forget. She turned to her soldiers. Stand down. The daughters return with me. The human lives, for now. Gasps rippled through the ranks, but none disobeyed. The queen swept her cloak around her and led her daughters toward the door. Yet as they walked, the youngest looked back, her tiny hand reaching toward the human one last time. And in that moment, the queen realized something that chilled her more than any war ever had. Her daughter's loyalty was no longer hers alone. It was shared. As the fleet rose into the stormy sky, the human stood outside his home, watching. He did not wave. He did not call out. He only stood calm and steady, like a rock against the storm. The queen looked down from her flagship, her daughters beside her. She whispered words no one else could hear. Human, this changes everything. The stars awaited, and the galaxy would never be the same.